Seneca said that it's not that our lives are too short, it's that we waste the time that we have. And I think if what you're doing daily isn't meaningful, you're just wasting. You could die tomorrow. That's the only thing you've got is this exact moment right now.
Welcome to Behind the Screens, conversations with background screening pros. I'm Les Rosen, your host, and I'm excited to have you here. On this podcast, we chat with the people who know the background screening world inside and out. Executives, industry experts, legal pros, and more. We dive into their personal stories and insights to give you a real look at what's happening behind the scenes. Whether you work in the screening industry or are just curious, Behind the Screens bring you the real, unfiltered conversations from the people who make it all happen. Stick around for stories you won't hear anywhere else. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, thanks to our good friends at the Pre-Employment Directory, Mr. Barry Nixon et al., we're able to present yet another episode of Behind the Screens. I know you've been waiting for this with bated breath, and here we are. And we are absolutely delighted today to have a person that probably could be described, at least for me, as the most interesting person in the screening industry. If you don't know Mike Coffey, I have to say you don't know background screening. He's going to talk about all sorts of stuff. You'll be glued to this podcast. And I have to say, on a personal note, if it wasn't for Mike, I would be a Philistine, because thanks to Mike, I was able to see Swan Lake, the Fort Worth version of Swan Lake, and become the cultured man that I am today. And so there's so many things to talk about. Let's get to it. Mike Coffey, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, Les. It's good to see you, man.
Great to see you. What's really interesting is, and we'll get to this later, is you have done well over 200 podcasts. And how does it feel to be on the other side of the podcast? Well, we'll talk about those, but now you're on the other side of it. You're the one being interviewed.
Yeah, it's always interesting to be on this side and not to be the one who's got to be listening and thinking about where we're going to take this and paying attention to time. So now I just get to abuse you and just go on these long run-on sentences and talk off, stream of consciousness and take it wherever it goes. So
well, don't worry. After 4 or 5 hours, we'll probably have to cut you off. So not a problem. All right. So a lot to get to. So let's start with the first question. Where are you today? Where are we talking to you from?
This is my podcast studio. So this is where I record from, and for Good Morning HR, my weekly HR podcast. And so this is it. It's in my home and upstairs. And this was my COVID creation. When we went remote in COVID, I needed a space to, other than just where I was working from, to do Zooms and things like that. And I am not a handy guy at all. I mean, I can't do anything. But I wanted a better background than just a plain wall. And so I spent a weekend and easily 3 times the money I should have spent and gas going back and forth to Lowe's to buy all of this plank and put it up on the wall. I had to buy circular saw. I had to buy one of those air pressure nail guns, whole 9 yards, all of that to build this background so it looked, what I wanted it to look like. And then like 10 podcasts in, I had a guest who had almost the same background. I said, hey, I've got the same background. I really like what you did. How much work was that? And he goes, oh, that's just wallpaper. And I was like, oh, it didn't even occur to me. And that's the story of Mike Coffey's life. Find the hardest way to do something and do it that way. And that's kind of my life story, I guess. I haven't thought about it that way, but it's definitely an allegory for Mike Coffey.
If there's an easy way and a hard way, Mike will find the hard way.
That's it.
All right. You see, my old joke. I have an agreement with painters and contractors. They don't practice law. I don't paint or contract, and it all works out.
So, yeah. The reason I'm alive is I will on occasion change a light bulb, and that's the extent of it. Yeah.
All right. So listen, we're going to upset the usual formation or the usual format, because you did mention your HR podcast. I mean, it's amazing. You've done over 200 and something podcasts. Let's start off talking about that.
Yeah. Good Morning HR. I think we just released this week, episode 223, and we've probably got another half dozen in the can, and we're booked up through into the spring with recordings. We drop an episode every week, and they're all HR related topics. I'm an HR guy by background, and I'm sure we'll get into that. I'm much more an HR guy than I'm a background screening guy in a lot of ways. And so every episode is pre-approved for recertification credit for certified HR people. And I started it, during COVID, post-COVID, 2021 came and the conferences weren't coming back. And like you, back in when you were a road warrior, I love speaking at conferences, HR conferences and HR associations and all of that, and meeting people, and it just wasn't happening. And so and webinars weren't doing it for me. I was doing webinars, but I didn't have the interaction. And so I started Good Morning HR back then, just kind of to meet new people and build some new relationships and do something and give back to the HR community, because that's, where I spend so much of my time. And so we started doing it, and we started with an outside producer, and he got us through about the first 200 or so episodes. And then he moved on to bigger and better things, and we brought it in-house, and my marketing team does all the work. And I just kind of show up, and my superpower is asking dumb questions to smart people. And so I do that. And so, yeah, we're something up close to around 275,000 downloads. And we're one of the few podcasts that gets research credit in advance for people. So the HR pros can just get their credit just by listening to my dumb podcast. So it's pretty cool.
That's remarkable. And your guest is just like a who's who in HR.
Yeah.
And it's a little, there's some Texas-centric things, but it's also national. Mm-hmm. And it's just an amazing variety of guests and topics. And it's just all this HR stuff. Not very little background screening, right?
Oh, yeah. I've never done an episode on background screening, in fact. And my marketing people are constantly telling me, you need to at least just do one. But there's a little commercial for Imperative in there, about a minute and a half. And that's mostly so I can write it off as a marketing expense. But it's really a passion project. And yeah, you're right. I talk to HR consultants, employment law attorneys. And so on occasion, we do something really, really timely with an expert.
Where can the listeners find Good Morning HR, the Mike Coffey show on HR?
On all the podcast platforms, or YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. It's on all of those, plus goodmorninghr.com.
You are everywhere. You're omnipresent. Yeah. That's amazing. All right. Well, that's fantastic. And so when you're not doing the HR and the podcast, Good Morning HR, what's your current role? Tell us about Imperative and what you do in terms of background screening.
Well, my main job, and the one I love the most, is I teach yoga 4 or 5 times a week. And so that is, if I could figure out how to monetize that at the level that, would pay all of my travel expenses and, trips to Europe and everything else, I would do that. But I do that. That's my avocation. I love it. I've been practicing for 15 years. Then I'm also chair of the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce's Talent Committee. And we're doing some interesting things, working on workforce stuff here in Fort Worth, where I'm based. I also sit on the board of the Workforce Solutions of Tarrant County, which is the workforce development board here in Tarrant County, where I'm at. I'm the regional chair for the State Chamber of Commerce. I'm state director-elect for Texas SHRM, which is the State HR Association here in Texas. And so that's all volunteer stuff that doesn't put any food on the table, but that's where I spend 70% of my time on those things probably. And they're all passion projects, things that are really important to me. And then I do own Imperative, premium background checks with fast and friendly service, and PFC Caregiver and Household Screening, which is the side of our company that really caters to domestic staffing, nannies, ultra high net worth families in their estates and things like that. I don't know if you realize this, but you are one of the reasons I have the PFC brand, because our mutual friend, Lynn Peterson, had a company called PFC out there in Oakland. And when she decided it was time to retire and move on, she reached out to several people about buying her company. And she was focused exclusively at the time on nanny agencies. And was only doing stuff for nanny agencies. And she talked to a lot of screening companies, and everybody's like, "Oh hell, no, we don't want to do that. That's too high touch, too high risk." And you and I think 2 other companies said you probably need to talk to Mike Coffey. And so after and we had met. I think I met her once at in a PBS event, And so she reached out to me, and it was hand in glove. Our approach was the same. We were dealing already with the same kind of clients who were really, risk averse. And, so that worked really well. So thank you, Les, because that's worked out really well for us over the last 8 years.
Well, and I remember when you were in San Francisco, you took Donna and myself out for a really nice dinner in Sausalito. So, hey, it worked out all the way around.
Yeah, that was your commission. So, yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, that's why I said, all right, what's the most expensive thing on the menu? That's my commission. All right.
There you go.
So let's go back to the yoga for a second.
Yeah.
So you teach it, obviously.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I started, it's funny, our mutual friend Larry Lambeth and I, back in about, I guess it was 2000, well, it's 2008, because it was right before I turned 40. He and I were at a NAPBS conference, and we were both complaining about how it seemed like the warranty had run out. We were getting, our bodies hurt. We were getting heavy. He's in Washington State. I'm down here in Texas. And so we started every morning doing P90X. Do you remember that workout on the DVD programs?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was like seriously like Marine boot camp type stuff.
Yeah.
That's hard stuff. Yeah.
And so he and I started doing that, and we did it for about 18 months, and I lost a lot of weight and got in a lot better shape. But then doing that, I was doing jumping jacks in our game room on Berber carpet and tennis shoes, and my foot caught wrong.
I think you
tore my
an
meniscus.
Injury.
Yeah, tore my meniscus. And so I got that fixed. They just did the little snip, a little thing, and did the PT, and it still was kind of crunchy going up and down the stairs, things like that. But it didn't hurt. And a friend of mine said, hey, you need to try this hot yoga. And I'm like, well, there was yoga in P90X, but I'm not going to do yoga. But after a few weeks, I finally did it. And I did it every day for 2 weeks. And then I went 2 or 3 times a week for about, the next 3 or 4 weeks. And my knee was better. And I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. And so then I was addicted. And so I've been practicing since, like 2009 now. And did my 200-hour teacher training just a little over 2 years ago. And it's 200 hours. And when you go to as many conferences as I do, the spring conference season, the fall conference season, I'm speaking and traveling, it's hard to plan out where you're going to do 200 hours of classes. So I had to say no in 2023 to a whole bunch of conferences and travel opportunities so I could be here to be in class for 200 hours. And so I did that, and wasn't really thinking I was going to teach, but then I just loved that so much. And so, I live right here next door to TCU. My studio is about half a mile from me. And so it's in my little bubble. So it's a pretty good life. And I teach 5:45 in the morning twice a week, and then I teach a couple times on the weekend. Then I'm always everybody's sub because I love doing it. So like this week, I think I'm teaching 7 times. It's a little bit much because we're in fall break.
So you went from a hot mess to hot yoga.
Yeah, well, no, I'm both. Yeah, if you've seen me do yoga, I mean, just because I do it a lot doesn't mean I'm good at it. And so, let's not confuse those two things. But I do it, and it's a lot of fun. My wife went through the teacher training with me, so we had a lot of fun. So, yeah, it's good.
And we'll get back to Larry when we talk about Concerned CRAs, too. Larry's not going to escape, and Noel Harding, but we'll get back to that. So with all the other stuff you do with the, I can't even remember all the volunteer things you do, but presumably it's fun, interesting, and able to give back. And
and it's mostly around workforce development stuff. And I'm a giant believer that Texas is the best place in the best country to do business in, and we're working to make Fort Worth the best place in Texas to do business in. So, it's kind of helping build my community with the skill set that I have, right? It's, the skill set I have is understanding business, understanding the people side of business, and so I can help there, and so I'm lucky that they let me do it.
And if you haven't been to Fort Worth, I mean, it's really a really cool place. Some great restaurants, and a little bit out of town. I can't remember what it's called, the Fort Worth
Sundance Square
Stockyards.
Yeah, the Stockyards up on. Yeah, we've got the old Stockyards. We've got our downtown Sundance Square. Then we've had some since you were here with us last. We've got some new developments, and we've got some amazing restaurants over in our museum district. This is my town. I'm homegrown. I am so Fort Worth that I was conceived behind the soda fountain at the Pangburns on 7th Street. But that's a whole story my parents probably don't want me to tell. But
really,
that's, but I go back.
If your parents want me to edit that out, we can. But and my favorite Tex-Mex restaurant is near Sundance. And the name of it just totally escapes me now. And they have a branch at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. But they have an enchilada kind of dish. Anyway, my favorite thing in the world. So I can't remember. It probably describes like 20 restaurants. So.
Yeah. In Fort Worth, you can't throw a dead cat without hitting a Mexican restaurant or lately an Asian restaurant. We got some amazing Asian food here, and
that's great.
It's really great. Yeah.
So let's go back to Imperative. You guys, you've kind of pioneered this idea of doing high touch, in-depth, sensitive background checks. It's not assembly line background checks at all. It's the opposite, in fact, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've got really good efficiency and we use technology a lot, but you're never going to see a database result go to a client with, if a client calls us and says, they see a deferred adjudication. If they call and say, what does this mean? We haven't done our job. So, I mean, our reports are a lot more verbose, explaining all the details. We're not doing one size fits all compliance. So we're looking at where the job is, where the local laws are, and reporting everything we can to a client. We still do all our verifications, all that stuff in-house. We don't farm it out. So it's just a lot more high touch. And we're also almost universally the most expensive option when we're talking to prospects. And I'm unapologetic about it. I mean, that's, I get referrals from our friends in the industry who just say, oh yeah, we're not, this, we know we can't make this client happy. And they send them to us, and that's always welcome and appreciated.
And I have done that in the past.
Yeah,
no question about it. Yeah.
And so, it's unique, and there's a lot of white glove stuff. We cater to clients, ultra high net worth families, private equity firms, people who aren't going to take an excuse if something doesn't go right, and my goal is never have to tell them we're sorry. Although on occasion we do for whatever reason, but
basically it's going to happen. I mean, it's impossible to be perfect.
But it's exceedingly rare, and my team is amazing. And so they're anticipating what clients' questions may be. And sometimes we go way overboard, and sometimes I'll see something we did on a report and I'm like, that was probably way too much to get the same result. But again, it's the Mike Coffey. They call it my employees call it the Coffey way, which means do it the hardest way you could possibly think of doing it to make sure there's no margin for error.
I love it.
But there are clients who will pay for that, and that's the different. So we don't respond to RFPs. That's just unless I write if I write the RFP, we get it almost every time because I put in the specifications about what the client really wants. But outside of that, our clients are coming to us after something's gone really wrong, and their employment law attorney or their HR consultant says, hey, you got to call this guy. Listen, if you don't want this to happen again, let's talk about this. And that works for me. And so, we don't sell a $35 or $50 background check. That's just not in our lineup.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So, it's just where we're at in the market. But the only time I lose a client is when there's a new HR person who comes in and they have a relationship with somebody else. And I've done that so much more to other people than they've done it to me. It doesn't really hurt my feelings.
That's what all works out. All right, well, let's get away from background screening a little bit and tell us a little more about your path. How did you get to this point where you do yoga, you do all this volunteer, you have the white glove background firm? What got you there? Where did you start, and how did you end up here?
Well, pure dumb luck, mostly, really.
PDL,
when I'm
right?
talking
Pure
to
dumb
young
luck.
people, I'm sorry?
PDL, pure dumb luck, right?
That's exactly it. When I'm talking to young people, my sons and their friends and people that age, or even some of the yoga teachers, these kids who are college students at TCU who are teaching, I always say success is in this order: luck, mindset, and then skill. And I have leaned so heavily on the luck end of that but I was an HR guy in the 90s. And one of my last HR corporate roles was a corporate role where I, among other things, I managed our relationship with our background screening company. At the time, I think the largest healthcare system in Texas, and dealing with that relationship. And this is pre-internet and pre-anything. And I needed to understand the Fair Credit Reporting Act because that was when the 97 changes came around in 96. And I had to go down to the public library, get a copy of the U.S. Code and make copies and sit there and read it and understand it. And then I became the biggest pain in their neck because they weren't necessarily the great service that I felt like we needed, especially on the healthcare side. And I became an expert in it from that side. And then I moved on after that and had an HR consulting practice, and that was going well. And then I had one client that was a financial startup that was growing crazy fast, but their people practices weren't necessarily that great, and they had hired somebody and had a big internal theft, and the FBI was involved, and the FBI was holding this person's rap sheet and saying, "Why did you hire this person?" And they're like, "Well, we got a background check and it says they're clear." And so they brought me in to look at their entire employee selection process and just help them formalize, because they had a lot of issues. And it was really an interesting project. And so we did all their employee selection stuff. And part of what they needed was better background checks. And I wrote the RFP to have the really specific things that I would want for them to have. And at the time, you remember those companies, Choice Point, those guys who aren't even around anymore. If they did respond, they were marking up the RFP so much that it was clear that they weren't going to give them what they wanted.
Right.
And finally, their VP of HR said, "Well, why don't you just do this for us? Because you understand all this, you know this." And I'm like, "Well, I'd have to go and get a private investigator license, hire people. I'm not sure I'm going to do this consulting thing forever, but I'm not sure." And so I went home, and Christy, my wife, was pregnant with our first kid. And I mentioned that to her that night, and she looked at me, she said, "Well, buddy, I'm not going back to work, so you have to figure something out here." And I was like, "Oh." And so that's how we had two conversations. Her not going back to work full time and being a stay-at-home mom, which it was a perfect job for her. She was amazing at it, and me starting this company. And so we just kind of stumbled into it, and it was just pure luck. The right person. But it was also one of those things where I was really lucky. I had a profitable client from day one. So that was the other amazing thing, because they were already such a big company. And so we did that, and we kept focusing on those kind of clients. And so we dealt with, those really risk-averse clients, usually who had something go wrong and who will pay to get it done right. And then, like I said, you made that connection to me and Lynn Peterson, and that brought PFC into our fold. And so now we deal with all those domestic staffing firms. And we've also got a set up where families can come to us and buy a single background check and get our very best product without, having to set up an ongoing account and all that, but we give them the same service. So it's worked out really, really well for us. And I'm proud of the team mostly, because I've built over 26 years an amazing team that they make me look good. All I have to do is show up, and the clients just tell me how great my team is all day.
All right. Well, that's an amazing and fun story. And we'll get to some of the other stuff that you mentioned in passing, because there's a lot more interesting stuff to go through. But as you go through this career path, is there anyone who comes to mind that was a mentor to you, or an early influencer that you want to call out to? Or
well,
give
whenever that comes up, and that's a question. When you get to a certain age, people ask that question a lot more. And my granddad, in a lot of ways, raised me. And he was a World War II Marine, came home from the war. No real education. He spent some winters freezing on the flight line at Carswell and what became General Dynamics, then Lockheed, and worked his way up to being a project manager on the F-16 project. And I grew up watching him get up. He worked the early shift. He would roll out of the door probably at 4:30 or 5 in the morning every day, and I watched him do that. And he just taught me the value of hard work and being in grit and just doing what you had to. And then when I was in 5th grade, I got my first job. I have not been unemployed for more than a day since 5th grade. And that was working for a man named Wade Watson. Mr. Watson, he was a world famous, one of the top chinchilla ranchers in the world. And, so chinchillas are these South American rodents that have the densest fur in the world, and that's when they make these very expensive coats that activists like to throw paint on. And I lived out in the country, and he lived nearby, and I knew he hired high school kids. And so I asked my mom one day for money to ride my bike about 1.5 miles or 2 miles to the nearest little store. And I said, and she said, "Go get a job," or something to that effect. And I took her literally. And so I rode my bike over to Mr. Watson's house and knocked on his door, and he opens the door and he's looking down, and he is probably 150 then. And I said, "Are you hiring anybody?" And he put me to work that day. And I fed and watered chinchillas from the summer before 5th grade all the way, I guess, probably till my sophomore year in high school. And I learned so much from him. Just dumb little things, but I still hear his voice, like saying, he called me Tiger, and he'd say things like, Tiger, a man pays you for a day's work, you give him a day and a half work, and things like that. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And so I just remember those kind of things. And so I just learned to work. And then when I got in the corporate world, I worked for an amazing VP of HR early in my career named Diane Gallo, who I learned a ton from about dealing with people and how, not just the HR side of it, but just treating people with compassion and respect. And that's one of our core values at Imperative, working as one with compassion and respect. And I learned that from Diane, and just being truly interested in your employees and in your team and having real relationships with them. And then, to be honest, in the screening industry, the people I respect, people like you, our friend Larry Lambeth, Noel Harling. There are people, Kevin Klimas, there are people I've met through the industry who, they're good people, and they believe in the reason that we do what we do. And so I've just benefited from just a whole chance meetings with a lot of people who I wouldn't, had I not known them, I wouldn't have been as well off as I am now.
That is fantastic. So with all this experience we talked about, is there an early lesson? You talked, I love the idea, if someone pays you for a day's work, do a day and a half, but is there an early lesson in your career that has stuck with you, that bubbles to the forefront? I know probably lots of lessons.
Yeah.
But what would be like, the main one if if you're talking to a high school class and you're asked to give them one bit of advice, what would that be?
Yeah, when I'm talking to entrepreneurship classes like at TCU or something like that, what I always say is the thing that's helped me the most is understanding what my strengths are and playing to my strengths, and then surrounding myself with people who can backfill all the things that I'm not good at where their strengths are. And that's definitely, that's how my marriage works, but also the company. And so I think that's the big thing. So many people are in jobs that they're ill-fitted for, just from their behavior and what they really care about. And the money will follow or the money won't, but you'll always find a way to make your bills if you're really doing something that matters. I'm a big reader and I study a lot of the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca. But Seneca said that it's not that our lives are too short, it's that we waste the time that we have. And I think if what you're doing daily isn't meaningful, it's, you're just wasting, you could die tomorrow. That's the only thing you've got is this exact moment right now. And so trying to push against the grain of what you're suited for. I'm not saying don't grind. If something's hard, it's hard and you got to rise to the challenge. But if I was going to sit and do accounting all day, I'd shoot myself. It's just not my, it's just not my skill set. And so I think that's what it is. And then surrounding people around you who are much better at all those other things and staying the hell out of their way. And my team holds me accountable. That's the other thing I think is, especially once you get into a leadership position, you've got to be accountable downwards. You have to trust your people to hold you accountable and call your BS. And my people, sometimes more than I want. In fact, one time I've got a coffee cup around here someplace that says, "Because I'm the boss, damn it." Because we were in a team meeting years ago and somebody kept pushing back on something and asking why we're going to do this. And I just hit my hand down on the desk and said, "It's because I'm the boss, damn it." And the next day I came into the office and that cup was sitting on my desk, and I left it there for years because it always reminded me this is not who you want to be. And my teams, they're amazing. They're really good at what they do. So I can let them do that.
And I have to say, they're the only person I have ever interviewed who has quoted Seneca. So congratulations.
Okay. There you go. I'm actually halfway through rewriting Marcus Aurelius's Meditations from my own perspective, from my own, my own take on what each of his entries means. And so, it's my way of kind of centering myself every day.
You see, that's different. I just saw Gladiator 1, and that was enough Marcus Aurelius for me.
There you go.
And here you are rewriting it in a way that's meaningful to you. So, all right. The world is different. All right. Well, Mike, all the experiences that you had and all the exposures and all the areas, the whole world that was open to you to go into, but you ended up in background screening for the reasons you said, but you also stayed in it.
Right.
And so there must be something about the background screening industry that intrigues you. What about it?
Well,
Why
it's one of
background
those
screening?
things where I think one of my personal values, and that's another thing I tell college students is if you don't know what your personal values are, you're going to make a lot of dumb mistakes in your career that you don't have to make. And one of my personal values, and it sounds so self-centered, and if you've met me much, you probably know it's true, it's earned appreciation. And by that, what I mean by that is delivering real value and being appreciated for it from other people because I deserve it, not being admired because, I'm so handsome, which is not really a problem I've ever had. But when I deliver value and people truly appreciate what I've done, it means a lot to me. And so early on, I found that, we're kind of in our little pond. We were the only fish giving doing that. And so we've stuck with it. I've still got, our very first client got bought by Chase years ago and that went away. But our second really big client is still a client today.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And they appreciate us, they trust us, and that means so much to me. And I mean, it's provided well for my family. I mean, it's paid for my kids' college and probation fees and everything else. And so, it's been great there. But also, I've built a team and most of my team, none of them came from the background screening industry. Most of them wouldn't have had these opportunities that they've had and the successes they've had. We used to call them the island of misfits because you would never predict that these would be the people that be running a company as well as our company is. But it's because, we've certainly invested in them time and training, but their skill sets are so great. So it makes it fun to come to work. I don't have mornings where I wake up and think, oh, damn, I got to go to work today.
Yeah,
And so
right.
I just stick with it because I enjoy it so much. And it gives me a way to impact the community. I mean, we do a ton of, like a lot of screening companies, we give a lot of it away to organizations we really care about. And I know that they're safer because of it, that the communities they serve are safer. So I'm really proud of that. And other than, I guess the other two big things I'm really proud of would be convincing Christy to marry me and then my three boys. And so, but
Well,
the
let's talk
company
about
is
your
my
three
baby in a
boys.
lot of
'Cause
ways.
yeah, I mean, you have three really remarkable sons. You want to just give us the quick lowdown without
Yeah, without breaking a
not
button and
embarrassing
pride.
yourself or having them
Yeah.
or making them mad at you?
Yeah. Well, the good thing is if I am on it, my kids will never hear it. They have zero interest in ever hearing my voice on anything. But yeah, I've got three amazing boys. My oldest is an engineer at a NASA contractor who works on space station projects and designs things that actually have been on the moon and go up into space. And I guess he's just almost 4 years out of UT's engineering program. My number two son went to Royal Ballet School and graduated during COVID and that spring. And he's in his sixth season with the Norwegian National Ballet. And you saw him when he was a kid when dancing here in Fort Worth. And then my youngest
And that's
is
why you go to Oslo every so often.
yeah, we go to Oslo a couple times a year because he's based out of there. And then that's kind of our jumping off point when we go someplace else in Europe in the summer. Like we spent a couple of weeks in Amsterdam, not just Amsterdam, but in the Netherlands this summer. But we're going over here in October to see him dance, who's got a really good part in Giselle. And so we're going to go see that. And I told him when he moved to Norway, I will come see you up until the end of October or any time after the end of March. But I will never be in Norway in the winter. I'm a Texas boy, and I get angry at 40 degrees, and I'm not going to be there.
Not, being from Texas, you will not see a winter performance.
No.
And then the
my
younger
youngest
one, the third one.
is a senior at Oberlin at the conservatory at Oberlin, and he's a
amazing.
clarinet performance major. And I always said we only get one liberal arts major of you three kids, and the ballet kids already got that. But after I let Andrew go away to high school to Houston Ballet and then go to Royal Ballet in London, I could hardly tell Stephen no, and he's happy. And he's committed. He works really hard, and he's an amazing clarinet performer. I can't even play the radio, so anybody who can even play a harmonica impresses me. But yeah, he loves it, and so we went up to see him performing Beethoven's. I'm going to get it wrong. I think it's Beethoven's 6. He had the lead clarinet performance in that with the symphony orchestra. a few weeks ago took my 96-year-old grandmother, my 76-year-old mother, and my 81-year-old mother-in-law.
Wow.
Got all the grannies through TSA both ways, and they got to go see him perform. So that was a lot of fun.
So your oldest son's the scientist. Your second son is the dancer. I mean, and you said he was also at the Royal Ballet in London as well.
Yeah, he studied at Royal Ballet School in London. That's where he
fantastic.
graduated from. Yeah, he's got his college degree from Royal Ballet is in English classical dance.
Oh, that's
that
amazing.
and $5 will buy you a Starbucks. But it's,
Right. And your youngest son's a musician. So you married well. I mean,
I married well of myself. Oh yeah, yeah.
So-
Christy and I, from our first date to the day we were married was slightly over 10 months, and I had to move fast because if she figured it out, we wouldn't be here. So
we talked about your proud moments and the things that kind of bubble to the top. So maybe we'll skip to the next thing, is that you have played a significant role in the PBSA, Professional Background Screening Association.
mostly as a
Formerly
thorn in their
NAPBS.
side, I think. But yeah, okay.
It doesn't matter. All right. NAPBS. And you and Noel really, along with other people as well, man, the hours that you guys put into accreditation just boggles my mind.
Yeah, it's interesting because when NAPBS back in the day was first formed, got the invite to go to that first meeting, I think in Scottsdale, the people I knew who were going and the people who it was really representing, putting it out there big, I thought this organization is going to be an apologist for the worst behavior in our industry, and I just refused to. I said I'm not going to go to that. But then their second year meeting was in San Antonio here in Texas, and so I said, yeah, I'll go to that and see. And went down there, and that's where first time I ever met Noelle. And if you've met Noelle Harling, she is a force.
That may be where I met you as well. I don't know.
Yeah. I think.
I'm
I'm sure that's the first time we met. And I'd heard about this accreditation. They had just a kind of an exploratory meeting in a boardroom about exploring some sort of accreditation for the industry. And I went ready just to throw crap on the walls mostly, and walked away after meeting Noelle especially, but a few other people, and thinking, okay, this could be a real thing. This could really be something meaningful because, the industry was already getting clobbered even then by regulators and some plaintiff attorneys just because of some of the sloppy things
Well, it was the Wild
technology.
West. Yeah, there was no standards, basically.
Right.
Yeah, other than getting sued.
And that was it. And so, Noelle, co-chaired that committee for several years and had a lot of other people work on it alongside us. You were on the board when we were working on that.
Yeah, when I gave the first speech at the very first meeting, I said we have to get accredited. We either police ourselves or other people do.
Right.
And it worked out that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we did that, and we worked all through that, published that, and I served my time on the NAPBS board, and the industry has grown and changed a lot, and I still got, if we're going to be honest, some of my concerns about the association that were proven true, that it was an apologist in some ways and still protected incumbent bad behaviors. I mean, like the accreditation standards we first put out, they said, they, without getting too detailed, but, talked about the database issue and making sure that databases were verified before you reported them to an employer if you were going to be accredited. And the standards were all, we thought they were all zipped up and approved. We sent them to the board, and at the last minute, the board took that one clause out. And
those were the days where, there's a lot of things happening back in the day. I mean,
that's when you and I and Larry, because of that, I was furious. And you and I and Larry got together, and I'm going to mostly blame you because it was your idea to start.
It was.
We started Concerned CRAs, and we said, okay, well, if our association won't do this, somebody needs to take a stand. And we created Concerned CRAs, which was basically focused on, it was a commitment from screening companies just to do two things: verify your damn database records before you report them to an employer and protect the consumers and the employers that way. And don't offshore PII unless it's truly necessary for the research. And we quickly had a couple hundred companies, small to medium-sized companies, sign up, say,
Sign the pledge,
this is right. Yeah. And they signed the pledge. And then at the first, you remember the first NAPBS meeting we went to after that? Me and Larry got cornered by some of the board members and other people and said, "Are you saying we're not concerned?" And I said, basically, I don't think you are concerned because you're doing this.
Well, but things evolve, so
eventually,
fair.
yeah.
And
I think we helped some. And I think the plaintiffs bar did it, did most of the work. They made the insurance companies wake up and make people start, doing a better job too. And so,
but that's part of the evolution of any industry. I mean, basically, it was the Wild West. It was not. I mean, there was no barriers to entry, and it developed correctly in the sense that, now it's canon, it's gospel that you don't report a database result without verification and 607B and 613. So that's just that's just part of this is part of the growth. So it all worked out. But the Concerned CRAs was really a lot of fun because I know I suggested that to Larry.
I think we were all at that point in our career where we were just ready to give a little finger to the world and say, we're going to do it our way.
Yeah, it's where we had a couple hundred, and there was no enforcement. It wasn't an organization. It wasn't an incorporated thing. It was just a lot of firms that we take the pledge.
Yeah,
and and to be very careful about offshoring. Not that you couldn't offshore, but you just had to have protections in place and maybe some disclosure, but whatever. That was a lot of fun. The adventure that you and I had with Larry on that was great. And Noel had a podcast previously. I also talked about accreditation. So those are it's really interesting how things develop. Hey, listen, Mike. Every organization needs somebody to push, right? And so that's.
I'm good at being deterred in a punch bowl. So I don't mind that. So
it's all good because in the end it all kind of works out. So listen, we talked enough about background screening and HR and all that good stuff. And we've talked a little bit about life beyond screening with hot yoga, but what are some of your other hobbies other than, donating all the time you possibly could to HR causes and good causes and in yoga? What do you guys do for fun?
The other two things are travel and eating. We travel a lot. Love Mexico, love Oaxaca, especially San Miguel de Allende. But then we go to Europe every summer because of, to see Andrew and then go someplace. And there's a chance, I've got a friend who's starting a Western style, she's Indian, and she's starting a Western style yoga program in India. And so I may be going to Bangalore next year to teach a Western type yoga, a non-metaphysical type of yoga to a generation of Indians who are disconnected from the spiritual aspect of it, the metaphysical side at least. And so that may be happening too. But so travel and food. When we travel though, I pick my Airbnbs based on where there's a yoga studio nearby with an early class. Right. And so, we take yoga with us wherever we go, but I'm a giant foodie. I'll try anything, and I've eaten some weird stuff. And some of my favorite food in the world is street food from someplace in Mexico or some little street in someplace in Europe, and just there's some vendor selling off a cart. And I eat it, and it's wonderful. And I'm just praying it doesn't evacuate, like a 5-alarm fire in about 2 hours. But yeah, it's my, that's kind of it. I don't have much time to do anything else. Volunteer, travel, and do yoga.
So when you get a chance to go to India, maybe you have a chance to see the Taj.
Oh yeah, I definitely want to do all of that. And depending on how much time I can plan to get away, I may spend some time studying at an ashram too. Just understanding the side of it that, the cultural side of it that, obviously in Fort Worth, Texas, I'm not picking up on very much.
All right. That's great. Well, if you eat street food in some of these countries, take your Pepto-Bismol and your Cipro.
But I've been really lucky. I've only gotten sick once in all our travels from something I ate. And that was, of all places, I was fishing off the coast in Mexico, and the boat captain, his wife had made us some like breakfast tacos, and something on one of the breakfast tacos did not like me.
Oh my God, you
And so I was nauseous, and you're way out in the ocean. That was not a pleasant trip.
Mike Coffey, the man with the iron stomach. That's incredible.
Usually pretty much, yeah.
He'll eat anything, anywhere, anytime. All right. Yeah. So now we're coming a little bit to the end here. So let me just finish up here with the section we call Fun Facts, where we ask our guests to share something about yourself that people, some people might know, but not everyone knows, that completely unrelated to background screening and is something that when people hear about it, they'll go, Mike, really?
Well, usually for that, I mentioned my first job was in 5th grade working at a chinchilla ranch. I mean, you don't meet many people who've been chinchilla ranchers at one point in their lives. But beyond that, the other, it kind of ties into the HR, is I met my wife and we started dating when she worked for me in HR. And so that was, I didn't realize, we would become good friends, and I didn't realize we were dating because my wife's really, is, beautiful. And I just didn't, and I'm this. And so I wasn't thinking she was going to, give me the time of day. So it didn't occur to me. And then once I realized, oh, this is going someplace, I had to call my boss, who's the VP of HR, and say, hey, I think I'm maybe dating Christy. and she said, yeah, that's what I heard. And I'm like, no, you couldn't have. I just found out. And like I said, we were dated 10 months later, but it was your typical HR breaking the rules.
So you had no NCAA, no clue at all. You're seeing her all the time, but we're just friends. We're not dating.
Yeah, I just couldn't imagine.
I guess maybe I am.
Yeah. That was pretty much it, yeah. And then once I realized it, I was like, I got to move fast here. This girl's, she's way over my league. So,
all right. Not to mention that you broke every HR rule, but
yeah. Well, I mean, as soon as I realized it, I reported it, and she moved out from under reporting to me. And believe me, that was the last time she ever took an order from me. Was when she, in the last 29 years.
But remember, you're the boss. Damn it! You have a cup that says so.
Yeah. That coffee mug is the only thing suggesting that has any validity. Yeah.
And that rule, even though it would not apply at home, so it doesn't matter anyway.
No. Right. Yeah, for sure.
Well, this has been great. It's unbelievable that we're approaching the hour mark. I think we just got started, and gosh, we've talked about so much. But before we, and I got to remember that name of my favorite Tex-Mex restaurant, and I have to go to Fort Worth and say hello.
Yeah, it was not Joe T. Garcia's. I mean, that's what's really famous here. But maybe Blue Mesa, or I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I think it's just one word. It's near Sundance Square. It was there. It's been there for a long time.
And I'm probably gonna walk right past it or go there for dinner this weekend and say, oh, obviously this is it. And I can't imagine. I can't think of what it is. We've got so many great ones here.
Well, I'll find out. But at any rate, so listen, you're the right person to ask this to. There's a lot of people that are watching this who either they're thinking of starting a firm, or they've just joined the industry. They're a newbie as a verifier or a criminal record researcher, maybe they've been doing it for a few years, and they would like to get involved and get engaged. And they may not be in a position where they're on the management team. They may not have the ability to really say send me to any PBSA, but if somebody says, okay, I'm at the start now, and someday I want to this is my industry, I want to do something. What would you tell them? What would your advice be?
Well, I think what I said earlier. First of all, make sure you're proud of the way you're spending your days and your time, and that it's meaningful to you. But if you're not going to go to PBSA, or if the industry conferences aren't there for you, if you're working with, TazWorks, ICO, any of the platforms, whatever platforms you're on, a lot of them have some sort of advisory committees for compliance or different kinds of things. And that's a great way. I run the compliance committee for the TazWorks Power Users Group. I co-chair that. And so there's ways to get involved on that side as well. But if you're really going to spend much time in this industry, you also need to understand the HR side, understand what your client side of the business is. And so even if you're not in sales, maybe look at your local SHRM chapter and attend some of those meetings, get to know what HR people are actually doing. You don't have to show up to sell anything, but when you understand the lives, what's going on behind the HR desk, that's only going to help you understand why what you're doing is really important to your clients. And so that'd be another way to do that.
I mean, that is advice I have not really recalled hearing before. Maybe someone else mentioned it, but man, that is just so invaluable, because we all, we're all looking at our own whistles and bells and so forth. But it's really at the end of the day, there's two end users. There's job applicants who don't pay us, but they're still our clients, and the HR people. And it's such a great idea. If nothing else, just join. You could be you could be a newbie and still decide to join the local HR association. Go there every month. You meet people. You learn stuff.
Right.
That's a great piece of advice.
And there's probably some sort of professional emphasis group in that HR association for recruiting. So you get to meet some recruiters or some of the talent management people who are dealing with your product and, or a product like yours. So you understand, and if they see you're earnest and you're not trying to sell them, never try to walk into an HR meeting and sell people. But
you can't sell HR. Yeah.
It's a relationship, but they will share information and they will mentor and educate. I mean, that's kind of a core personality trait of a lot of HR people, and they'll
kind
do
of the
that.
DNA of being in HR. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's great advice, folks. If you hadn't heard that before, just make it an action item. Just get up and join and go to the monthly meeting. And you always meet the person to your left and your right, and you hear the speaker. And you're there just to absorb and learn like a sponge. You're not there to sell anybody, and you may not even be in sales, but you just don't know what will launch you in what direction, what will take off, what will occur.
Yeah, and it goes back to that luck, mindset, skill thing. You never know what the luck that this chance encounter will turn into either. So, I never dreamed I'd be in HR, and that's a whole nother story about how I stumbled in HR. It wasn't anticipated. It was after I crashed my first business, at 22 and flew that airplane right into the side of a mountain. And so, you never know if you're just open to the opportunities and you're truly curious and you treat people with respect. The world's your oyster.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing, Mike. It has been fun. We're just about at the hour mark, and you probably have some other things to do. So before we conclude, let me give you the last word. Is there anything I didn't ask that you wish I would have? Any closing thoughts? Anything you want to share or add? The floor is yours.
I think just an opportunity to reiterate my appreciation for people like you, Noel, Larry, Kevin Klimas, Bob Capwell, all kinds of the old OG NAPBS group that when I was probably more intemperate than was advisable, and y'all reeled me in at times, but were always kind and supportive. And, this is a better industry because of the efforts of our generation of screeners. And now I see, I look at the PBSA board or I go to the conferences, and there are a lot of people I've never seen or heard of, and they've never seen or heard of me, which is probably to their benefit. and Jason Moore, I'll even say something nice about Jason Moore, so just all the,
as would I. No, that's no problem at all.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, there's just those old school Nick Fishman. There's a whole bunch of old school guys out there who, made a difference. And I always look back fondly on a lot of those experiences and just really appreciate the people that I met through the industry.
Mike, that's fantastic. I really love the fact you took. I don't know how you found the time to even talk to me, because I can't. I don't know how you stop time and you live a 28-hour day without sleep, but obviously you do. So
I've got a one-to-one with my marketing team here in a little bit, and then I'm teaching yoga again later. So it's a good day. Yeah, I wake up every day and I'm Mike Coffey. What else could I want? It's a pretty good life.
Right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of Behind the Screens. I do have to add, sponsored by our good friends at the Pre-Employment Directory, the Background Buzz, and other resources, and our special guest today, who never fails to amaze me with stories and lessons and things I didn't know before and things I've learned, Mr. Mike Coffey of Imperative Background Screening. So it was a pleasure to have you, Mike. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Les. Have a great one. Good to talk to you.
Appreciate it. All right, that was yet another wonderful conversation with a background screening pro. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an update. And hey, if you got a moment, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It really helps get the word out. For more info or to catch up on past episodes, or to make suggestions or to suggest possible future guests, head over to our website. Once again, this is your host, Les Rosen, and it's been a pleasure to bring you another episode. See you on the next episode. Thanks.